Hi everybody. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at creating an Ubuntu virtual machine using something called VirtualBox. Now I tend to use virtual machines because it lets me isolate particular jobs of work from each other, and it means that my dependencies on my system don't get all mixed up, which can sometimes be a problem. You may not really care about that, if you prefer Docker or you just want to install on your host system, you do whatever makes you feel comfortable. But for people who want to be running exactly the same setup as the one that I'm going to be describing, what you can do is you can follow this sort of prep work for starters. So here we begin. You download and install VirtualBox, whether you're running a Windows host system or a Linux host system. Just follow the instructions on virtualbox.org. Now, having done that, the next step is that we actually run up the VirtualBox application, which is this. You see I've already got a few, which we can ignore. And what we're going to do is create a new one. So if we go to new, and we'll call it Ubuntu 20.04 LTS. I use 20.04 LTS because that's the kind of long time support, which is a useful thing in the fast moving world of Linux and open source. So that's going to create a virtual machine specification in its default locations. We don't need to worry about that. I'm going to give it 4 gig of my memory, which seems about right. Depending on your host system, you might want to use more or less. I wouldn't really recommend less than 4 gig, to be honest. And then we're going to create a virtual hard disk drive. This defaults to 10 gigabytes. I find that that's not an ideal amount. 20 gigabytes is kind of usual for what I do, but let's go and do that and modify that up to 20. What's quite nice about these hard drive images is that it won't create the full image to start off with, so it'll only expand as you use that image more. So there's pros and cons there. The pro is that you don't waste a load of space on your host system that you're not using. The con is that if you are running out of space on your host system and you're doing stuff in your virtual machine and your machine image is expanding, bad things can happen because you run out of real physical space. But we're not going to get to that point with what we're doing here. So we create that that virtual machine specification there. We can look at the settings of that. Again, it's running Linux, etc., 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 etc. Here, I've got an extension to VirtualBox installed, which gives me USB 2 and 3 support. There's some kind of strange licensing situation to do with this, and it doesn't come as standard with your VirtualBox installation. Now, you're going to need this because you're going to, well, depending on what you do, if you are looking to connect IoT devices, which is what this is all about, then they'll probably be connected with USB. You're going to need the USB support, and to install that, go to the VirtualBox site again and install the VirtualBox extension pack. That's free as well. You just got to agree to a slightly different license. Download that. That will run up and install into your VirtualBox application, and lo and behold, you'll find that you've got these extra USB bits and bobs to play with, and you really just want that set to USB 2 support by default. It's what you need to be talking to the devices that we're going to talk to in another installation of this. So that's all to the good. The next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to go to the storage settings of our virtual machine. You can see that we've got the disk image that we created here, which is a maximum of 20 gigs, currently very, very small because there's nothing very much in there. It's not encrypted, not worrying about that. And we've got a virtual CD DVD supported here. That's empty, it's not connected to anything. But what we are going to do is grab the installation media for Ubuntu, which is my Linux distribution of choice. Again, you know, you use whatever you feel comfortable with, but I'm going to be using Ubuntu. So, you know, if you want to be using the same stuff as me, then that's the choice that you want to make. Here you see that we have an Ubuntu desktop, 2004 LTS. You know, please do support these guys. They do fantastic work. And you see that that ISO is starting to download. I have, in the best Blue Peter traditions, already downloaded one to save us the time of that. So if I grab that ISO image here, ISO image is basically an image format that represents your CD or DVD drive, CD or DVD disc, more or less exactly. So this ISO looks to this virtual machine just like the real thing, which is kind of neat. So we're going to mount that. That's now present. And what we can now do is we can start our virtual machine and we can start doing interesting installation things. So let's do that. This runs up the virtual machine. It's booted the Ubuntu image. That's loading in. Doing all of its checks. Nearly there. And look at that, we've now got a nice little Ubuntu virtual machine booted up and ready to go. What I want to do here, as we discussed, is to install Ubuntu. You know, if you know all about this, just skip forward, don't worry about it. We're just going to be doing very, very standard things. I'm based in the UK, so my settings are going to be for the UK. It's going to be a normal installation. I'm going to install third-party bits and pieces. Seems to be running a little bit slow. This virtual machine has, as we said, you know, we created the virtual drive image for this. So we don't need to worry about erasing the disk. We're not erasing the host system drive. We're just erasing our empty drive image. We could choose to use LVM if we wanted, and we could encrypt stuff, but we're just going to keep this really, really simple for now. That's going to write some disk information, partition table information to our virtual drive. We're based in the UK time zone, so that's the one we're going to choose. I am Alex Lennon, for those who don't know, and we're going to have a login. And what we're doing is this is busily copying files over from the virtual ISO image into our Ubuntu installation, ready to extract and install them, and yeah, and do all the things that we need to do to have Ubuntu installed up and running. So what I'm going to do is let this run, and we will we'll speed this up for you folks when you come to look at it, so that you don't have to sit and wait for the length of time that I'm going to have to. Okay, so we're about 22 minutes in now. Took longer for me than it did for you, and we're now installed and ready to go. So what we're going to do is restart our virtual machine. And what we're going to do is to make sure that we have ejected the drive, which indeed we have, and press enter, and now, as you might expect, that virtual machine is gonna reboot. So what we're now doing is we're booting off the hard drive image that we installed all of the Ubuntu good stuff to, which is quite nice. I think I figured out why everything's going slightly slow here. It's because while we're doing this, I'm also recording everything, so that's taking some of the load on the system as well. So if I log in to the virtual machine, you'll see this come up, and we've basically got the standard Ubuntu getting started stuff. So I'm going to skip all of that. I'm not particularly interested in all of that for the moment. And off we go. There we go. We're done. So that's great. Now, there's a couple of things we still probably want to do here. One is that as we resize this window, that's not very helpful. It's still staying quite a small area. It's really not great for development purposes. And that's because, you know, we refer to the kind of the physical system as the host system here. And then we've got another Ubuntu running inside this virtual machine. That's the client operating system. And the client operating system doesn't actually know anything about the wider world that it's sitting within. It doesn't know that it's inside a virtual machine. So what we'd like to do is to tell it a little bit more about the world it finds itself in, so that we can do some extra interesting things like resizing the screen automatically. So we're going to do that. Now, Ubuntu helpfully is telling me that there's a newer version out there, and I don't want to know about that. I want to stick with LTS, so we'll just ignore that and disable that in the future. To tell the client operating system a bit about the world it's in, what we need to do is to install a guest editions CD. And what we've just done by clicking on install guest edition CD image is we've virtually inserted an ISO image into our virtual CD DVD drive. So if we look at that, we can see indeed there we have this ISO image, and that sort of comes with the installation of VirtualBox. So that's not something you have to worry about. So what we're going to do is run that the code on the client CD, the virtual client CD, and off it goes. That's now installing some bits and pieces, some kernel modules and things into the Linux kernel in the client operating system, so that it will know that it's running inside a virtual machine. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense, and that I think has worked. So let's go for that. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to reset the system to enable those changes to take effect. And there we go. And we'll boot it up nicely. So with a bit of luck, if I now resize the window there, ta-da! You see that the client operating system now understands that I've resized that window, and it resizes itself. So that's kind of nice, you know, because you will know that you want as much screen real estate as you can manage to lay your hands on, so you can see what's going on nowadays. So So there's a couple of other bits and pieces. I mean, that's the important stuff really, but there's a couple of other bits and pieces that are worth us talking about. Again, maybe you know all about this stuff, but for those who might be new to this, we can have a little bit of a talk about some of the, some of the nice features. So one is, if we look at the devices menu, and this is telling us the things that are attached. We can attach ISO images if we want. We've got audio enabled, which is kind of cute. We can do clever things with the network. All you really need to know at the moment is that there's a virtual network adapter inside this virtual machine, and that enables us to connect out of our physical system into the wider world, onto the internet, to pull information down and do normal stuff that we would normally do, but it doesn't allow people outside to connect into us, which is generally how we want things. You can change that around if you wish, but there's generally really no need to do that. So, I mean, I've just run up Firefox there, and if we go to Google, you got Google, so you can see we've got internet access, so we kind of shown that. Now, the next thing is that there's shared folders and a shared clipboard and there's drag and drop. And these are all quite useful things because we often want to get information and files in and out of our virtual machine. So I often have a little shared folder that I set up, and I make that a shared folder into, say, a directory on, this is on my host system now, the real system. So if I make that auto mount and I make that permanent and I go okay, that was in VirtualBox, the application. Yeah, so that was outside the client operating system, what we just did there with our shared folders. Now if I go back into my client operating system, I've now got a new shared drive, basically. One of the irritating things about this is that by default it doesn't give you user access to that drive. So if I just create up a terminal here, and if I sudo to be the super user, and then I look at what I've mounted media SF downloads. And if I go to media SF downloads, all that good stuff in there is on my host system. So I can copy files backwards and forwards if I want to, which is nice. It's really useful. And then similarly, there's a shared clipboard. I usually enable that to be bidirectional, which means that I can copy things out of my my host system. So if I do, so if I create a little bit of text on my host system, this is some text, and I save that as some text. Okie dokie, so that's on my host system now. If I copy that and I then paste that here, oh, that's interesting. So that's a new one on me. Let's try that again. Copy, paste. Huh. Do you know? I've never seen that before. Okay, let's try this a slightly different way, because what I tend to do most of the time is I copy text out of my host system, which is here, and I put that into my target system, which is here. Yeah, so that tends to work, and I use that for, you know, if I'm copying bits of text from URLs or websites or whatever it might be, and I find that a really useful way of moving information backwards and forwards. So that's quite a neat thing to be able to do as well. So we've looked at file copying, and we've looked at the shared clipboard. Drag and drop is very much the same. Probably, in fact, what I should have had enabled if we're going to look at moving files backwards and forwards. So we've just enabled drag and drop, and if I take my file and I drop it onto the It still doesn't like that. Okay, so we'll leave that then. Next thing is I tend to want to get rid of the things that I don't use on this start bar. I use that. We are not going to need the Thunderbird, and I tend to install the browser of my choice. The only other thing I tend to do is if we go into a terminal on Ubuntu, the way that you well, one of the ways that you can manage the installation is using the Apt Package Manager, and apt-get is your tool of choice. So we can run apt-get to update our list of what packages are available to us, which is helpful to keep this virtual image or virtual machine image up to date. So what we're then going to do is to upgrade our new virtual machine image to all the latest and greatest in the Ubuntu 20.04 LTS release. And I do this from time to time just to make sure that these images are reasonably up to date, reasonably secure. So what we'll probably do here for you again is just to skip ahead to the end of this. Okay, and that's all updated and installed. Next thing is I tend to use a package management tool called Aptitude, which is basically like a sort of console front end to apt. And it makes it a little bit easier to find and install packages that you need to get. So we're now installing Aptitude. That's installed. If we run it up, this is the console user interface to Aptitude. I won't kind of worry you with all the bits and bobs of that, but you do a U to update your feeds of packages. And then you can search using L, and I'm going to search for something else that I want to install, which is Terminator, which is a really nice little terminal management tool. And what I'll do is I'll install that. I'll show you Terminator running, because you'll see me using this in future episodes. You're probably going to think, where is that coming from? Well, this is where it's coming from. So we're going to quit out of Aptitude, and then we're going to run up Terminator. There we go. So that's just giving me a nice configurable terminal window. And also what I'm going to do is when you run stuff up, you can right click on it and you can add that to your favorites, so that if I now kill that, that stays on my start bar, and I can just bring that up again if I want to, which is really nice. And one of the things which is really, really nice about Terminator is that I have a window doing stuff here, and I can split that and have another window here, and I can split that again, and I can have lots and lots of windows, and I can sort of break out the things that I'm doing in that way, which I find really, really useful. So it's kind of cute. It does lots more than that. So this is our pretty much installed, ready to go Ubuntu client operating system image. Last bits and pieces are that instead of shutting this down every time, we can pause that virtual image, if you like, and we can exit out of it. And instead we power it off. That would lose all of the information, which is probably not really what we want to do. What I normally do is I save the machine state of whatever I'm working on, and that takes a little bit of time, but it basically persists all of the memory of this virtual machine to file, so that I can go away and I can come back at a later date and pick up pretty much exactly where I left off, which is really quite nice. So, we've exited out of VirtualBox there. If we run up again, you can see our state here is now saved. And what I can do is I can double click on that, and that restores our saved state, and it will pop up and it will be pretty much exactly where I left off. And there we go, ready to go. So if you're in the middle of something and you want to stop doing that and go and do something else, that's quite a good way of doing things. Very last thing, you may or may not wish to do this, but if I say shut this system down, and you'll see why I'm doing that now. So that's powered off. I've basically got that image of a virtual machine into a state where I'm happy with that. I quite like that. So what I'm going to do is to take a snapshot of that state, and I'm going to call that initial installation. So if I ever want to revert back to that state, I can do that just easily by selecting that. So that's kind of cool. So if I have a kind of a current state of play with my virtual machine image, and I install a bunch of stuff and I change things around, and maybe even if I'm doing, you know, a little bit of a sort of a session like this, I want to revert back to an initial installation so we don't miss any dependency installation steps. I can just go back to that, and it's all very, very easy. So that's worth knowing about too. So I think that probably covers everything that I wanted to go through with you about how to set up a VirtualBox virtual machine running Ubuntu 20.0 for LTS. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to see about installing some tool chains and frameworks into that virtual machine so that we can actually start playing with some embedded and Internet of Things IoT devices. So please join me in the next session.